So what really makes a company great? Is it all about the money they make? Today, we're going to break down the psychology of what makes a workplace successful. And we're going from the big picture, like the entire economy, all the way down to something we can all relate to, your next performance review. Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's start with that big question. What actually makes a company stand out as truly great? Is it just about hitting those profit targets quarter after quarter? Or is there something more going on? Something deeper, more human, kind of running the whole show from behind the scenes?
Okay, to even begin to answer that, we first need to get on the same page about what we mean by an organization. I mean, before we can talk about what makes one effective, we got to know what it is. And the definition might be a little broader than you think. So here's the textbook definition. At its heart, an organization is just a group of people, right? They're arranged in some kind of social structure, all working towards the same goals. And it's not just big companies we're talking about. Think about it. A football team, your local school, even a charity. They're all organizations. Any group with a shared mission and some kind of system for getting things done. Right. But just because we can define an organization doesn't mean we can easily measure how effective it is. It's really not that simple. It's not like an on-off switch. A much better way to think about it is like a complex machine with all these interconnected gears, where one little part turning affects everything else down the line. And this visual here really breaks it down for us. You can see there are these different levels, kind of like nesting dolls or ripples spreading out in a pond. It all starts with the individual. That's you. Your performance affects your group or your team. And that team's performance, well, that impacts the organization as a whole. But wait, it goes even further out. The entire organization is sitting within this wider environment. Think the economy, competitors, social trends. It's kind of wild when you realize that your own personal motivation and, say, global supply chains are, in a weird way, connected in the same system. So if success is this complicated, four-layered thing, how in the world do you actually measure it? How does the CEO know if they're really winning? Well, lucky for us, some smart people have actually created frameworks to help wrap our heads around this. And one of the most famous of these tools is called the Balanced Scorecard. It came about in the early 90s, and it was a total game changer because it was designed to solve one huge problem: getting businesses to look beyond just the financial numbers. And what's so brilliant about the Balanced Scorecard is how it breaks things down into four key areas. It basically forces a company to ask four simple but powerful questions. First, the financial part. How do our shareholders see us? Are we making money? Then, the customer side. How do our customers see us? Are they happy? Are they loyal? Third, internal business. What must we excel at? What are our unique strengths? And finally, maybe the most important one, innovation and learning. Can we continue to improve and create value? The whole point is that you can't just be good at one of these. Real sustainable success comes from balancing all four. Okay, so we've got these frameworks, these scorecards, all these complex strategies. But here's the thing. When you really dig into it, all of this, every single chart and every single metric, it all points back to one thing: the ultimate source of performance. And what is that one thing? It's the people. It's always the people. I mean, think about it. Financial results, cool new products, amazing customer service, none of that stuff just happens. It comes from the creativity, the hard work, and the dedication of the individuals inside that organization. This quote from Campbell and Wiernick really just nails it. They say, without individual performance, there is no team performance, no unit performance, no organizational performance, no economic sector performance, no GDP. Whoa, let that sink in for a second. The performance of the entire global economy, the GDP we hear about on the news, it's all built layer by layer on the foundation of what individual people like you and me do every single day at our jobs. And that idea right there brings us crashing down from that huge 30,000-foot view of the global economy right down to the ground level, to you, the individual employee. And we're going to talk about the main tool that companies use to try and measure all that important work you do, the performance appraisal, the review. So why do we even have these things? Well, companies use them for a few key reasons. First, there's the administrative stuff, deciding who gets a raise, who gets promoted. Pretty straightforward. Second, it's for employee development, giving you feedback so you can learn and get better at your job. And third, it helps the company itself to spot bigger trends, like, hey, maybe a lot of our teams need more training in this one area. Now, when your boss is actually filling out that review, they're usually looking at two different types of performance. The first one is obvious. It's called task performance. That's basically how well do you do the stuff in your job description? Are you hitting your targets? But then there's this other really interesting one called contextual performance. This is all the extra stuff, the good citizen behavior. Things like helping out a coworker who's swamped, or volunteering for a committee, or just generally being a positive force on the team. Both are super important. And all of that, your core job duties, your teamwork, your attitude, your whole contribution, it all gets crunched down and quantified onto a form that looks, well, a lot like this one. You get a number rating for communication, for quality of work, for attendance. It's this attempt to take a complex human being and translate their entire year's worth of effort onto a single sheet of paper. But let's be real. Anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of one of these reviews knows that this whole process is tricky. Trying to capture a person's value with a few numbers and checkboxes, it's not really a science. It's messy, and it's way, way harder to get right than it seems. This chart here just perfectly illustrates the problem. Look at the gap between what we want to measure, the ideal, and what we actually end up measuring. For an artist, the ideal is creating great art. What we measure is what a few experts think. For a teacher, the ideal is to truly impart knowledge and inspire students. What do we measure? Their students' test scores. You see the disconnect, right? They're just not the same thing. And as if that fundamental problem wasn't enough, you have to remember that this whole process is also incredibly vulnerable to good old-fashioned human bias. I mean, the manager filling out your form isn't some objective, all-knowing computer. In fact, there are some classic rater errors that pop up all the time. You've got the leniency error, that's the boss who's just too nice and gives everyone a 5 out of 5. Then there's the opposite, the severity error, the manager who's super harsh and no one can ever seem to please. And then you have the central tendency error. This is the one who avoids conflict and just puts everyone right in the middle, a 3 out of 5. The problem is, any one of these biases totally skews the results and makes the feedback pretty much useless, both for you and for the company. So this is where we land. We started this journey by seeing how individual performance isn't just some small thing. It's the literal engine that drives our entire economy. And yet, the main tool we've designed to measure and encourage that performance, the review, is, as we've seen, deeply imperfect and loaded with human bias, which leaves us with a pretty big final thought to chew on. Your performance review is meant to measure your work, but can it ever really measure your worth?